Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Punjabi Shanava Jaya Garuda Jaya Gopi Shanava Jaya Garuda Yashodanandana Raja Janaranyana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranyana Namandakira Lalakari Radha Madhava Jaya Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Punjabi Janava Jaya Giridhari Janava Jaya Giridhari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranyana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranyana Namandakira Lalakari Natira Lalakari Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Shri Shri Garuda Prabhu Krishna Balaram Gira Shri Shri Gonikai Ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavate Vasudevaya. From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 41. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Sattvam Rajastamaviti Tishrasura Narakaha Tatrapi Ekaikasurajan Vidyanti Gatayastridha Yadaikaikataro Navyam Svabhava Upahanyate Sattvam Rajastamati Tishrasura Nirakaha Tatrapi Ekaikasurajan Yanti Gatayastida Yaidaikaikataro Navyam Svabhava Upahanyate Sattvam Rajastamo Iti Tishrasura Nirakaha Tatrapi Ekaikasurajan Vidyanti Gatayastida Yadaikaikataro Navyam Svabhava Upahanyate Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Raja, mode of passion. Tamaha, the mode of darkness. Iti, thus. Tishra, the three. Sura, demigod. Nri, human being. Naraka, one who is suffering hellish conditions. Tattva, even there. Ekaikasya, another. Rajan, O king. Vidyanti, divide into. Gataya, movements. Trida, three. Yada, at that time. Ekaikatara, one in relation with another. Anyabam, from the other. Svabhavaha, habit. Upahanyate, develops. Translation purport by His Divine Grace C.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: according to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness is the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. The living entities individually are being conducted by a particular mode of nature, but at the same time there is every chance of being influenced by the other two. Generally, all conditioned souls in the material engagement are influenced by the mode of passion, because every one of them is trying to lord it over the material nature to fulfill his individual desire. In spite of the individual mode of passion, there is always a chance of being influenced by the other modes of nature, by association. If one is in good association, he can develop the mode of goodness. And if one is in bad association, he may develop the mode of darkness or ignorance. Nothing is stereotyped. One can change his habit by good or bad association, and one has to become intelligent enough to discriminate between good and bad. The best association is the service of the devotees of the Lord, and by that association one can become the highest qualified man by the grace of the Lord's pure devotees. As we have already seen in the life of Sri Narada Muni, he became a topmost devotee of the Lord simply by association of pure devotees of the Lord. By birth he was the son of a maidservant and had no knowledge of his father and no academic education, even of the lowest status, that simply by associating with devotees and by eating the remnants of their foodstuff, he gradually developed the transcendental qualities of the devotees. By such association, his taste for chanting and hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord became prominent, and because the glories of the Lord are non-different from the Lord, he got direct association with the Lord by means of sound representation. Similarly, there is a life of Ajamil, the sixth canto, who was the son of a Brahmana and was educated and trained properly in the discharge of the duties of a Brahmana, but who, in spite of all this, because he contacted the bad association of a prostitute, was put into the path of the lowest quality of Chandala, or the last position for a human being. Therefore the Bhagavatam always recommends the association of the Mahat, or the great soul, for opening the gate of salvation. To associate with persons engaged in lording it over the material world means to enter into the darkest region of hell. One should try to raise himself by the association of a great soul. That is the way of the perfection of life. Om Agyan Dhamarandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakramanigamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. Actually, in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a nice sloka that says, from the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance, develops foolishness, madness, and illusion. So in this verse, it describes the results of action. Action performed in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Action in goodness results in knowledge, which brings about proper action, resulting in purity. Action and passion produce misery. Why? Because it's caused by unlimited desires and insatiable greed. And action in the mode of ignorance brings about madness and illusion, which causes one to act foolishly. So the Bhagavad Gita recommends and stresses development of the mode of goodness through this bhakti yoga process, and thus become truly enlightened. Actually, many people in the world today, we see are practicing yoga. Yoga has become very popular in the world. So many yoga schools. And for most people, yoga is more or less, it's just a physical fitness program, which helps, relax the mind, deal with stress, keep the body in good shape. Because, people living in this busy modern world, one of the big problems is that people, they suffer a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So for these people that are practicing yoga, for some of these people, it becomes, you could say, a change in their outlook in life. They become vegetarians, they practice meditation, they try and give up bad habits, they try and focus on trying to become more holistic. It's all about, it's kind of like the mode this is entering into the mode of goodness, It's all about caring and loving yourself, catering to your real self-interest, planning out your best future, making your life more meaningful, your destiny more beautiful. So generally, such people, they become aware that in nature, there's different qualities. And the more goodness one introduces into one's life, the more happy one feels, the more peaceful one feels, the more satisfied one feels. So it might not be the highest level of consciousness, that we can achieve through the bhakti process. But it's a high kind of consciousness, to be situated in a kind of a mode of goodness. And of course, part of that mode of goodness is you want to be the kind friend to all living entities. And that includes the animals, the birds, the fish, the trees, Mother Earth. This is kind of the mode of goodness. We should take good care of ourselves, find some internal balance in our life. So, the Bhagavad Gita tells us this action and goodness, it leads to inner happiness, it leads to some degree of enlightenment. And we see the whole process of Krishna consciousness, even the process of Varnashram Dham, is scientifically designed to help society develop this mode of goodness and ultimately even go beyond goodness to the Suddhasattva, this stage of pure goodness. Now this is one of our goals in Krishna consciousness. We become steady in the mode of goodness and then gradually even go beyond that to Suddhasattva. Some people ask us, can anyone be a Hare Krishna? Where do you start? So firstly, we tell people, the change doesn't have to be so drastic. You can stay in your same house. You can drive your same car. You can keep the same job. Enjoy your recreational activities. Some people like to, exercise. Some people like to go to the gym. Some people like to play sport, tennis and golf, whatever. So you don't have to give up those things. You can go shopping at the same supermarket where you shop. But now something changes. You go for the vegetarian items in the trolley. So this is what we tell people. First, become a vegetarian. We know that food is sacred because it comes from nature and sustains us. But on a deeper level, what we eat affects our consciousness and also our spiritual advancement. So in Bhakti Yoga, we learn how to prepare vegetarian food with love and devotion for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And that food uplifts us, purifies our consciousness and existence, and it's food in the mode of goodness. Next thing we tell people, you try and practice this very, very powerful Hare Krishna japa meditation daily. And this will give you the strength, the spiritual strength and intelligence and determination to give up all those things that hinder your spiritual advancement. So just by changing certain things in a person's life, they will discover that their entire quality of life changes. They feel happier, healthier, more peaceful, more satisfied. Then we tell people, if they're ready for it, we say, throw out the drugs and alcohol. Everyone's into the intoxication in this modern age. It's not so easy in the beginning for people to do that. People become so attached. But after a while, you don't miss it. Many devotees of the Krishna movement have gone through that transformation. Many of the devotees were taking the intoxication, whether it was drugs or alcohol, even tea or coffee, whatever. But after a while, you don't miss it. It just means getting free of a part of your cultural conditioning that puts you in the mode of ignorance, puts you in the lower modes of nature, and minimizes your chances of raising your consciousness to the mode of goodness, where we can experience that, you could say, that natural happiness and joy that comes from within. unfortunately, in the modern day, society is built to teach you to disrespect yourself, to abuse yourself in a very polished type of way. If you look around, you'll see just cities full of advertising, encouraging people to indulge in intoxication and other illicit activities, promising them that it will give them happiness, satisfaction. Big economic manipulators prey on us, make a big business of deliberately encouraging people's dependency on such things. But we know that the illicit drugs and alcohol, any type of illicit activity, you put them together, they constitute just a tremendous form of oppression on the planet. Millions and millions of people now are addicted to all types of intoxications and illicit activities. Ultimately, Prabhupada was talking to the devotees in the early days. He said, ultimately, you cannot become joyful simply by material adjustment. You may become jolly, Prabhupada said, jolly, for some time by drinking and intoxication. But in reality, it's artificial. It's not really a state of joyfulness. That real happiness and joy can only really be found on the spiritual platform, when one is linked to the Supreme Lord in loving devotional service. Because Krishna, he's the very source of happiness and joy. So a real state of joyfulness is to be situated in spiritual life, in spiritual consciousness, in eternal life, full of bliss and knowledge. This is Krishna consciousness. So we have a time in the world now, in our modern civilization, where generally everyone is being governed by these modes, passion and ignorance, especially the mode of passion. Driven on by this material passion, people are just driven on by hundreds and thousands of unlimited desires and longings for more and more and more and more. More wealth, fame, followers, influence, power, prestige, sense gratification. And the result is that people become so deluded and frustrated and confused. This is why the Bhagavad Gita tells us that this action and passion produces misery, because it causes one to develop unlimited desires and insatiable greed. There's a saying, a modern day saying that, what does it go? Too many people are spending money they haven't earned to buy things they don't really want, to satisfy people they don't really like. People, it's just so much propaganda, that you have to live up to a certain status. People, and the banks tell us, shortage of money is no problem. You can take out huge loans, which bind, husbands and wives to just work hard for so many years to try and fulfill their material desires. And they're never satisfied. And actually, they get in so much stress and anxiety that they cannot even really sit back and enjoy the very things that they're working so hard to achieve. And of course, action and ignorance brings about madness and illusion, which causes one to act foolishly. We see that in the world now. A lot of people, they suffer from this, it's a modern word, right? What's it called? Disrationalia. I don't know if you've heard that word. It means that people's inability to act rationally despite having adequate IQ and intelligence. We see that in the world today. So we have a time in the world. We have a time now in the world where people need to become more holistic by aligning themselves with these divine principles. And we see that. These principles are so nicely and carefully outlined in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. And just by following these divine principles, these instructions given by the Lord and his representatives, it can naturally elevate a person's consciousness beyond these lower modes of passion and ignorance and bring them to the mode of goodness. And even beyond that, to the mode of pure goodness. And we can see that, the future of the world depends on it. So the Bhagavad Gita also informs us that these modes of nature, they directly control us. And it's very difficult to overcome them. However, if one surrenders to Krishna, Krishna tells us, he's the ultimate controller of this very powerful, deluding material energy. And there's no way we can overcome this by our own efforts. But Krishna will personally release us from the control of this material energy if we just surrender to him. And just by surrendering to him, following his instructions, living the pure, spiritual and godly life, one can transcend these modes and come to the platform of pure goodness. And of course, we read in the scriptures about symptoms of someone who has transcended the modes. They're completely satisfied in themselves. They have no envy. They don't hanker for anything. They're beyond the dualities of happiness and distress. They always enjoy the happiness within. These are symptoms of people in the mode of goodness, people who have transcended the modes. They're not affected by honour and dishonour, satisfied to live simply. They're kind friend to all living entities. They just respect everyone. They see everyone equally. They're always dedicated to serving Guru and Krishna, living the pure spiritual and godly life. So this is action in the mode of goodness, which results in knowledge, which brings about proper action, resulting in happiness and enlightenment. So this is the path of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness. This is why Krishna came 5,000 years ago and spoke this great science of Bhagavad Gita, because he knows, unless we get this knowledge, we will not be able to get out of the grip of this powerful, deluding material energy and get that freedom and happiness and that peace of mind that we're anxiously searching for. So we consider, as we go on in Krishna consciousness, we become we start really appreciating the fact that, Srila Prabhupada came here to the West and started this Hare Krishna movement, because if Prabhupada didn't come, we wouldn't be here today. There wouldn't be any Hare Krishna movement. There wouldn't be any transcendental knowledge circulating throughout the world. So this Bhakti Yoga, it's a very open process, which means it's up to everyone to determine, how much they want to get involved. The Vedic literatures, they teach us how everyone can live comfortably and happily in this world, and at the same time gradually attain perfection, while moving progressively at one's own individual chosen pace, according to one's nature, according to one's commitment, according to one's motivation. So in the beginning, one may start by simply chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, reading some of these books. And as one becomes more enthusiastic to make spiritual advancements, and get involved. We have so many things happening. We've got temple programs, festivals, study groups, home programs, a whole range of service options that people can get involved. Because, this bhakti yoga, it's a culture of sharing. It's a culture of sharing, of helping each other on our spiritual journey in life. So this is what Prabhupada's mentioning this in this verse. That this spiritual communion or association with those people who are spiritually minded friends is one of the timeless practices that gives us great spiritual strength and great inspiration. Living and working in this modern busy world and at the same time maintaining our spiritual practices can be very challenging for people. Therefore, in our bhakti tradition, we learn about the importance of regularly associating with those people who share our spiritual aspirations and understand us and support us in our spiritual journey. This is what really charges our spiritual batteries. It's an important part of walking the spiritual path. To bring, we see that, a lot of people down on religion these days because, there's so many terrible things happening in the world today in the name of religion. Something as powerful as religion, if it's misused, it can create one of the greatest threats to society. And we see that because people can justify anything in the name of even the most horrendous activities, in the name that they are blessed by God, and of course, if you study history, millions of people have been killed under some kind of religious umbrella. A lot of people are really down on religion. They don't even want to hear the word religion. So many people becoming atheists. So, of course, in that on the other side of the coin, we see so many people have done amazing things. Like sacrifice even their very life in service to the Supreme Lord and humanity, and of course we understand in Bhakti Yoga that a lot of people into anarchy today. Don't listen to anyone, don't follow anyone. Just be your own leader. Just be selfish. Don't listen to anyone, don't follow people. They're really anarchists, they're really down on institutions, especially religious institutions. And I think, many of us may have been influenced by that anarchy before we became even devotees. Because it's just coming through the media, it's coming through the music. People just want to be rebellious. But we know that, the whole idea of establishing bona fide religious and spiritual institutions is to create synergy, to create community, to bring like-minded people together, establish loving relationships, to honor each other's opinions, to get motivation, get inspiration, education, to be accountable, to brainstorm together how we can improve the situations here, so we can all advance in our spiritual journey, which in trying to develop our love and understanding of the Supreme Lord, which is life's real goal. So, despite our shortcomings and differences, our real strength, you could say, lies in caring for one another and unifying as one family, living under the care and guidance of our Supreme Loving Father and His representatives. So it's this is a real, ultimately, I was just reading about the World Health Organization. They've issued this statement that one of the biggest epidemics in the world, next to heart disease, they say, is depression, unhappiness. And, there's just millions of people on antidepressant drugs, people, committing suicide, people trying to see psychiatrists, psychologists, so many people. It's just, this unhappiness or depression is just become like an epidemic in the world today. Although we know that everyone in the world has this universal desire and yearning just to be happy. It's quite natural and normal. Whether you realise it or not, everything you do in life is basically aimed at making yourself happy. When people, in surveys, when people of all cultures, races, ages, religions and lifestyles are asked what they want from life, they all put desire to be happy at the top of the list. More important than having lots of money or having a good job or this or that. And we see that, is happiness. It's a big topic. There's so many books written about how to become happy. Big surveys, what makes people happy. We write and we sing and we dream of a happiness that will simply go on forever without any interruption. Actually, Aristotle, the great famous Greek philosopher, he called happiness the goal of all goals. And, we could look at different levels of happiness. Now, first of all, we've got unhappy. I think everyone knows the meaning of unhappy. I mean, everyone. At some time or other, you get that feeling, right? Anxiety, you're stressed out, or you're tired, or you're lamenting, or hankering, or you just don't feel on top of the world. Does anyone have that feeling? Sometimes, You're just feeling low, or blue, or, dreary. It's not the same as clinical depression where you just can't live a normal life, but there's some days you just don't feel on top of the world. And then we've got another one is happiness for bad reasons. Can you think of any happiness for bad reasons? Addictions, drugs, alcohol, gambling, overeating, oversleeping. We even had one devotee in Adelaide. I don't know if some of the older devotees right remembering, Trigatra. In Adelaide, we used to have a basement. Sometimes you'd go down there and he'd just sleep for 3 days. And some will do that. Just try and avoid depression, or not feeling good, Some people, they just sleep. Just try and void out. And it's a fact. Some people into intoxication, trying to numb the effect of their unhappiness. Excessive sensual activities. Everyone trying to get high from unhealthy addictions or just trying to numb the reality of unhappiness. And as I said before, these drugs, alcohol, gambling, illicit sex, you put them together, they constitute a tremendous form of oppression on the planet. Some people, they just... Actually, I was reading in Wollongbar, it's statistically in Australia, it's got the greatest people that are overweight, obese people. There's some people, they just try and, they're not feeling good, they just start eating. They're trying to escape into just eating food. That type of way. And then, of course, we have happiness for good reasons. Having good relationships, having nice things, having a nice car, a nice house, nice family and friends, successful career, financial security, enjoying healthy food and exercise and sports. These things, for most people, these things were important and necessary because people get pleasure from having the healthy things in their life that they want. It gives them this emotional happiness. And of course, this brings us to the fourth level of happiness. Happiness for no reason. Happiness for no reason. A state of happiness that's not dependent on external circumstances. Actually, in practically so many different religions, they talk about this happiness for no reason. They have certain phrases they use. I think in Hinduism they call it pure bliss. And in Christianity they call it the kingdom of God within, the kingdom of heaven within. And in Islam they have another word, terminology for it. And Buddhism, they have a term, this happiness for no reason. So in our Bhakti Yoga, we call this inner happiness because we call it the happiness of the soul, the spiritual happiness, which comes naturally when we put the Supreme Lord in the centre of our lives and we sincerely try and serve Him and please Him. Sometimes Prabhupada would use that analogy of the bird in the cage. You have a nice cage. And you have some nice bird in the cage. And you're so proud of this cage. This cage was just like, no one else has got one of this cage. It's a really good cage. So the owner, he spends so much time looking after the cage, but he forgets to feed the bird. The bird dies. So people, they lavish so much attention on their bodies. I mean, practically their whole life is just centered around trying to make the body comfortable, trying to, find a nice, comfortable situation, trying to have nice food and this and that. And, the whole body is just, trying to make the body happy. But they forget about the soul. They don't know about the soul in the body. They forget to, nurture the soul. And so this is one of the important messages that we have in the Krishna consciousness movement for people. That actually that there's something, that you're not just this body. That the goal of life is not simply to enjoy this body. There's something else. Within the body, there's the soul. There's the real self. And that needs spiritual nurturing, spiritual food, which comes through, as I said, living the pure, spiritual and godly life, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, reading these sacred literatures, associating with spiritually minded friends that share our spiritual aspirations, eating pure spiritual food, and coming to the mode of goodness. Okay, I'll just finish there. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask, or like to make any statements about anything, or Srimad Prabhupada ki HG Garuda Prabhu Krishna Ram Logiraj HG Garuda ki Go.